Hello, welcome to another edition of Learn Analytics. Today I have special guest Evan here. He is a senior manager and has also worked in both the telecommunication space and consulting. So we'll get a lot of great talks and learn from him today. How are you, Evan?
I hope a long time no see. I'm good. How's
Great.
life on your side?
Great. Pretty good weather. I'll go outside later. And how's Canada right now?
I guess still no more snow, so which is the good side. So we're getting there.
That's good. That's good. Great. Good to have you here today. So maybe we'll just start off like we want to probably hear like how was your sort of data journey? How did you get into analytics and growing your journey here? So.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that it was a fun journey. So if you look at my career, that I have been in analytics almost since day one of my job, and then I've been in this space for the last 8 years. 2 weeks after the undergrad, so I joined Rogers, and then I've been staying with the company. Went from a different analytic function from supply chain, then to do marketing analytics, then to do customer intelligence analytics, then went to a centralized analytic team. Now is leading the digital analytic on the company. So it has been a long but a really rewarding journey for me as well. I actually learned quite a lot of stuff that from the analytics space. So went from doing a lot of data type of job, data mining, do some SQL type of job to do more business intelligence type of work. Now leading the centralized analytic team that doing the end-to-end analytic in organization, which was pretty interesting.
Got it. That's super interesting. Is there any particular types of, from your domains of different analytics that like you find the most interesting?
Not specifically, but what I see analytic might be slightly different than other people. What I see analytic is a function that you help the business to make a better decision, as simple as that. So regardless you're doing data mining, you're doing business intelligence, you're building a report, or you're building a PowerPoint slide. So your job is to help the business to be a little bit more effective. So that's how I see analytics. So that's why I did not ground myself in one typical area inside analytics. I have been like trying to explore or expand my skill set around the analytic area so that I can help to influence the business decision.
Got it. Makes sense. Is it what I guess maybe we could double down on that piece a little bit more. Like do you find I guess what I've seen also, like folks who might be more particular in one area, right, and one domain, right, and it sounds like you are more like you touch a little bit of everything, right? I guess what's your perspective on that? Like are there folks you worked with who are more like in one domain versus someone who is in many areas? Like what's your thought? So do you have any opinions there?
Yes, I guess for me, I don't start with the data. I guess lots of people start with the data. So you work with the Oracle database and you start learning Oracle. Then you work with SQL base and you start learning SQL. You work with like some BI tool, then you start learning some BI tool. So for me, I always start with the business problem. So what type of problem you're facing and what other technology that available to help you to solve the problem. That's how I get started. So if you have a business problem, and then you look at all the resources that have available for you and what are the resources, what are the data, what are the knowledge, what are the tools that would be able to help you achieve or help you solve the problem. That's how I get started. So I did not ground myself in a typical tool. So in the company that I work for, see that in the last couple of years, just the BI tool itself, so we went from Cognos, Power BI, Tableau, Domos, and then MicroStrategy. Like there's so many of just BI to itself. I think we have 6 or 7 of them in the organization. And if you just want to ground yourself in one particular area, that it's going to be difficult for you to learn other area, right? So for me, if I start with the business problem, and then that would be much easier. I have a business problem, I have the tools and the data to help me solve the problem. That's how I get started usually.
Got it. So it's more of like focusing on the problem and really learning the tools, because tools can change.
Yeah, but like tools and software, they always come and go. They're always changing itself. I think people who have an open-minded skill set and who have a really transferable skill set, they can always learn all this too. I don't think that two are difficult to learn.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Cool.
And I
Cool.
guess for me as the people manager right now, that I am I'm more than willing to invest to help the people learn the tool than anything else, because tools are always changing. It's the skill and people that making a difference. It's not a piece of software that making a difference.
Mm, yeah, that's great. Maybe we could go transition to that to like as a people manager, right? I'm sure you often interview candidates, right? Whenever you're hoping to grow out your team, right? Like I guess what are those like skills and characteristics that you sort of like look in at during an interview, you know? And
Yeah, so I guess for me that it's funny enough that I always have this discussion with my peer in the organization. Like I know that I work in a highly skillful industry that you sometimes need lots of skill set, you need some hardcore technical skill. But for me, if I have to put in a percentage of out of 100%, I usually look at 40% about the skill,
mm,
and another 60% is more about like what type of people you are, what are the or are you willing to open your mind and learn some other area? Did you have a good business acumen? Those are the more important area that I'm looking at.
mm, got it.
And you know, as the people manager myself, that investing in the people, like helping people to grow, like help people to learn the different skill set is my job. So I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Got it. Got it. So it's actually more you gravitate more about actual the person and what's their passion, like what are they trying to do? What are they like things like that
Yeah.
in interview.
It is more about the person, and also are you willing to learn or not? What type of personality that you have? But do you have a really open mind, or do you come in and say that, hey, I'm really good at SQL, but I'm not going to do anything that outside of SQL? If you're that type of person, for sure, I'm not that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not the best fit in my team. But if you come and say that, hey, I'm here to solve a business problem, like what type of tool that you have, what type of skills that you need, I will learn it to solve your problem. That I'm looking for more that type of person.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So did you? I guess how can what's your perspective on at least like a lot of new early professionals, right? So it's like how do they do like I don't think at least my perspective, I don't think the school really does you build that personality, or you sort of have to like go through that through experience, right? uh,
Yeah, I do have a personal experience about myself. I also have my perspective about new hire. So at least in my team, that I'm more than happy to hire new people. Like I couldn't agree more that when I had this conversation with one of my analytic professor in my MBA, so
mhm,
we had this really interesting discussion on why a lot of time that those people who newly graduate from school, they actually produce the most of the value in the organization and add the most of the value to the value chain creation in the analytics space.
mhm,
And then what we figured out is those people, they are more flexible, they're more adaptive to the environment, they're more willing to learn. So I'm more than happy to hire those people. And sometimes it is difficult because it depending on your hiring manager, right?
mhm,
Like a lots of time, a hiring manager will expect you to come with the skill set, come in, and the day two you start working and producing value for the organization.
mhm,
I sometimes not necessarily 100% agree to this approach. For me, would be a long-term approach. Like number one is the people coming in. It is a two-way stream. So number one, if the people coming in, how can the people learn and contribute to your team? And second, how you help the other people influence on the career decision as well. That is really important to me.
mhm,
So I like it, one of the really good example would be that's a girl who used to be in my team that she come in almost like know really little about analytics, but when she came out of the program in my team, that she was happy about analytics, she was passionate about analytics. She think this something that could be her career in her
mhm,
life.
mhm.
That's something that if as long as I'm making a positive influence on someone else's career, I think that is really important to me as well.
Got it, got it. No, I mean that's very powerful. Like it speaks a lot to an organization and a team aspect, and also like someone who had no experience come in, you know, and really come in with open eyes and sort of learn and do, right? And then
Yeah.
like actually changing, you know, their mindset on like maybe building, you know, analytics as a career.
Yeah, so if you zoom out in a high level, right, a school actually teach you a really important skill set right now. School taught you how to do problem solving. That's exactly what it needs in analytics. You have a problem, you solve the problem with the tool and the knowledge and the skill set and the data that you have. That's exactly what it is. And you do learn the problem solving skill in school. So if you zoom out, that's exactly what it is in the core of analytics.
Got it, got it, got it, got it. Cool, cool, cool. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about yeah, like we just talked about some of these core components, right? The people perspective to building you know, your career in analytics. Are there any things like, I guess on the technical side, you said the other 40%, like how did you sort of learn it? Was it through school or was it also through your own experience? Like what advice do you have for like folks to, they got the 60% down, how do they get the other 40%? Um,
Yeah, so so the approach I took when I was younger. So I look at analytic. It was not something I was lucky enough. So I got a job, and the job was in analytic, and stay until right now. I wasn't pick analytic or analytic pick me. It wasn't anything like this.
mhm,
So I guess for me, the way that I learned it was I look at the analytic value chain. So if you look at end to end of the analytic value chain, then you have data, you have data, then you have warehousing, then you have BI tool, you have data scientist, you have a bunch of other stuff.
mhm,
If you write it down in the entire analytic value chain, and then you start to check the box. So maybe number one as a foundation, you know how to massage it, and you know want to know how to deal with the data, right? And then you're trying to figure out what other skill set that you need to do ETL, to do like some streaming of data, like do stuff like this. So you start looking at like what are the two and skills that you want to learn. So I guess simple would be you learn some SQL, you learn some Python. Those are the good area to start with data. And then you look at move the next step, right? And then you look at, well, now you know how to deal with the data. The next step would be presenting the data to people. And then you start looking at BI too.
mhm,
And then you start looking at like what's the best way to present the data. And are you going to use this BI tool versus the other BI tool? Then what's the advantage of one versus the others? And then you start looking at like some other areas. And if you're getting into data scientist, then you start looking at into data science. You start looking at into feature engineering. You start looking into prediction and a bunch of other stuff. I guess the good way would be like try to write it down, figure out what are the end-to-end journey of analytics. I call it sometimes the analytic value chain, and
mhm.
then trying to see that how you and yourself can check the box in each of the components, and how can you get to a really good a stage of each of the component. I think those are really important.
Got it, got it. So starting off with sort of like the value chain, right? Like starting off and looking at each of these components, you know, from the data side, but then, you know, the actually warehousing the data to, you know, the data cleaning process, right? Like things like that. And then data analysis and then data science, like honing in on the skills of each
Yeah.
of the processes.
Yeah, I think those are the really fundamental of like you know the data, you know how to deal with the data, and then well, you're gonna learn a lot once you start this process, right? You're gonna learn a lot. When you deal with a small data set, maybe it's really easy, right? Lots of people say, hey, a little bit SQL is really easy to learn, and then everybody can write a select statement to put in a couple of filter. But then when you deal with the millions of rows of data, yes, but when you deal with like a billions of rows of data, even just write a select statement has lots of other components into it. It's not as easy to put in a select statement. So you might have to look at the partition. You might have to look at how the data store into each of the storage. You have to look at a bunch of other stuff as well. So
Mm,
get deep into each of the area, and then also able to see the bigger picture in the entire value chain and trying to get yourself up to speed in every single component. I guess that's really interesting and also important to the younger people as well.
got it, got it. No, I really like that approach. And I mean, even earlier where you were saying like you, you shouldn't start with like the tools and learning the tools. I think it's like starting with the fundamentals.
Yeah, so if you start with the two are difficult, right? I still remember when I start my job. So I'm not sure how many people still remember when you go to Walmart or Canadian Tire or Home Depot, they have this like black and green type of machine. So when I start my job, so the first SQL statement that I wrote was in this tool called AS400. It's the IBM mainframe computer that's been there for like last 30 years.
Mm,
Then I have evolved that like then we start using SQL Box, then start using Teradata, using Oracle, using Hadoop, now it's go into the cloud. So the tool is always going to come and go. So it doesn't really matter of the tool. It is the problem that you're trying to solve and the ability to figure out what's the best way to solve your problem. Those are more important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and I can't agree more than enough on those statements. Cool. So is there, I guess, maybe we, since you have such experience and expertise in analytics, right? I guess it'll be interesting to maybe share also like what do you see as like the future of analytics, right? Like where where jobs you see are gonna grow, and also like how do you see analytics now that's getting used, and how do you think it might get used more into in
Yeah.
future?
So I do have some prediction that what it might be happening in the next little while. So obviously there will be a lot of cloud migrations happening in the next couple of years. Like in the past, people would build up a little SQL box or a little server in some laptop or server. So in the future, like most of those would into the cloud environment. So cloud migration is going to be one of the biggest trends in analytics in the next foreseeable future.
Mm,
So second would be more data scientists work is going to be pop up. Like we just getting to know the data scientists right now, and I know that we have lots of crazy discussion about data scientists, but a lot of people just get to know it. And with 5G is coming with more data, like we're going to be producing. Like try to think in like 3-4 years from now, in every single little gadgets at home will
mm,
connect to the internet, and every single thing that you have at home will produce data.
mm-hmm,
And how you're going to use those data to come up with a good prediction, it is going to be really, really important. So which give you an idea that dealing with data would be more than like ever important in this industry, and how to deal with storing the data, clean up the data, like and then specifically deal with data in the cloud would be even more important. And
mm,
second would be just the data scientist component would be getting more and more useful, and then more and more accessible to the people in the future as well.
mm,
And then last but not least, and then would be a lot of people that the skill set that you learn today, it might be outdated in the future.
mm,
So just keep the open minded, keep it open minded, and then trying to keep learning all the new technology coming out. But it is really, really important. So one of the things that I see would be in even in terms of data, the way that we store the data today might not be the same way that we store the data tomorrow.
mm,
So the continuous learning on the technology would be really important in the future as well.
mm, mm. Great. I mean, these are, I mean, even if you look back, right, a year or 2 years or 3 years, I mean, yeah, like all things aside, just like you said, data is gonna keep growing. Like it's everywhere, it's on we're so dependent on our phones, right? And there's
Yeah,
so
I'm almost at the point I feel like even recently that I have been looking at lots of projects. I feel like that we sometimes have too much data. Too much data sometimes not good at helping a decision making process when you have too much data, too much noise.
Mhm.
Picking the right data, knowing what are the noise, what are the right uh, what are the right like causation of the
Yeah.
problem that you're trying to solve, and it's really important. And lots of people don't know what's the causation, what's correlation. Correlation doesn't mean causation. This is also really important in data analytic as well.
Yeah, and I mean those things go back to sort of like you have to know the fundamentals to
Yeah.
taking your intro to statistics probably on that case. But I mean another thing that you pointed is sort of interesting. Like I also think of this as sort of analysts is like, yeah, there is a lot of data. Like how do you really drive good insights around it? Like it's not that easy like from that standpoint, like making good business actions, right? Because data is growing and it's getting bigger and bigger. So like I think that's also something
Yeah, and also I think in this area that the ability to work with other people is also really important. A lot of time in a big organization or small size, medium size to the big organization, a lot of time that the analytic people is not necessarily the business people, and
Mhm.
they often not align. And then how can you come up with an analytical insight and to influence the business decision is also really important, right? If you look at high level the analytic value chain, you have data and then you drive insight and then you have business action and then you measure your outcome. That's like a high level like value chain of analytics. So how, and often those are different people controlling different components. How you come up with insight and influence the decision making process to other people. That is some skills that the people really need to learn. And those are the soft skills that you have to learn it on your job.
For sure, for sure. Great. Well, before we close it out, I usually ask this question to the guesses. So like if you have sort of like one word of advice or one one wisdom, right, for anyone who's like an early professional in analytics, like what would that be? Um,
I would say that don't get hang into the tool too much and keep it open mind. Focus on the business problem rather than the tool.
mm,
That's more important, and that's going to get you a long way.
mm, great. Thanks. That was quick and fast. Thanks, Evan. It's really good
No,
to have you.
nice chat, my friend. So hope we can do this later again.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Am I do okay?